Morgan Ladimore was a brave man. There was not even a second thought when the time came to defend his land, his people, his family. You would think that the war that raged in the north against the Orcish invaders and the dead was the worst of it. But Morgan's story will prove one thing, that some victories come with a price too costly to bear. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and come, take a seat by the fire. Morgan Ladimore was not born under any sign, nor marked for higher purpose. He lived an average, happy, and fulfilled life in Brightwood, a land to the east of the bountiful fields of Elwyn and part of the kingdom of Stormwind. He had found his purpose in his family, a young woman of the same village of his birth, named Liz. At the age of 18, they had already married and set to the great work of expanding this loving family. Together, the two would have 3 children, 2 beautiful daughters, and the youngest, a son. Many noted the two were quite in love whenever together. Not a day went by that the love between them ever wavered. These long years had seen some troubles, from gnolls or trolls or some other like, but nothing could disturb the idyllic beauty in which they lived. That was until dark forces, with darker intent, set upon their world. Invaders had come. What first began as rumour could be ignored no longer. Strange, monstrous green creatures had beset the human lands. Among them were dark casters, who seemed to control the dead. Each passing day the fighting grew closer and closer. Morgan was 32 now, when the call to arms sounded far and wide. Every able-bodied man was to join the fight. His heart was heavy to leave behind his family, but his courage would not falter. This was the only way he could truly keep them safe. He said his goodbyes and urged them not to worry. He would be fighting alongside the paladins of the Silver Hand. If he knew then, or perhaps suspected, that this would be the last time he laid his eyes on his family, he hid it well. He would be the strength that they sorely needed. He would embody their hope, and so he joined the Great Wars. Despite having little training, he took to the sword quickly and dutifully. Battle after battle, it hardened the soldier. He survived by some mixture of skill and courage and luck, making for himself a reputation as a noble and formidable knight. But war is trauma. The horrors he witnessed as it dragged ever on would leave scars far more terrible than those on the surface. To think he would live to see the screaming hordes of demons in service to a terrible Eredar master. A prince and heir turn on his own father and condemn so many innocent souls to the torment of undeath. The snuffing out of a beacon of hope for so many, as Uther was slain. It was a testament to his resolve that he stayed not only sane, but hopeful. He would champion those who could not defend themselves, all in the hope that he could one day return to his family. He knew he was keeping them safe, by keeping these horrors from darkening their door. But long years take their toll. He was not the young man, full of vigour he once was. Age and weariness had begun to creep in. But for now, the lands of man were calm, the threats thwarted at great cost. And at last, the moment had come for him to return home, a deserved reward of respite for a dutiful man of honour. The journey home felt longer than the war itself, but as he grew closer to the once familiar and picturesque homeland, he could not believe his eyes. The once aptly named Brightwood was now nothing more than a shadow of its former self. A gloomy, twisted sickness seeped into everything. Thick smog occluded the light of the sun, and nature herself had shriveled and withdrawn in its presence, leaving only rotten and hollow trees in remembrance of it. The darkness and gloom concealed much. It gave way to creatures too terrible to mention, but their presence could be keenly felt. Sometimes, the hairs on your neck would stand on end. A rustle in the dead brush, or the skittering of footsteps. Worst of all was the wind that howled as though it carried along the screams with it. He had heard of the death of Medivh and its consequences, but nothing could have prepared him for this. The once small cemetery on Raven Hill was now monstrous in size, dominating much of the landscape. His heart could no longer bear it. He rushed to his former home, only to find it a long ruin, with many of the others, but no sign of his family. He would begin his search in haste, first to the local village named the Grand Hamlet. Luck would have it the town was still there. However, the name had changed to Darkshire, a nickname that had stuck, from this being the last refuge in the gloom. His inquiry bore little fruit. So many were lost over the years, so many names left unaccounted for. But a priest in town offered a sliver of hope. Many refugees had fled to Lakeshire to the north, perhaps his family among them. This had to be it, he thought. Surely the light would not forsake his family after all he had given. They were there waiting for him. He could leave this dark place behind and start a new life with them together. He set off at once. Although he urged himself not to, a dark thought he could not shake in the back of his mind told him to first check the graves of Raven Hill. He started tentatively, checking each name etched upon the headstones or whittled into wood. But while there were many names he recognized, he did not find his family. After making his way through well over half of the graves, the once nagging doubt was beginning to be replaced by hope. Oh, how wrong he was to worry. He should finish this task and make all haste to... He stopped dead in his tracks. Here it was, Lys Ladimore, beloved wife and mother. He fell to his knees, and the very air seemed to rush right out of him. He begged and pleaded with the cold stone, his grief consuming him at every moment. His sorrow gave way to anger, to hatred, to loathing. He cursed the light and all of its false promises. 3 young attendants saw the painful sight and attempted to console Morgan, but nothing ever could. He had a hole now where his heart should be. He drew his sword from its sheath and wildly flailed at the gravestones. In his madness, he struck not only stone, but memory guided his strikes, and 3 innocents were cut down where they stood. Eventually, the intoxicating rage would pass. The haze over his eyes would lift, and he would look upon what he had done and drop his sword to the ground. It was heavy and echoed through the now silent graveyard. He had robbed others of their light, just like the darkness had robbed him of his. He screamed one last time as he took a dagger from his waistband and plunged it into his heart. The horrific sight was found later that day. There had been enough loss, enough heroes taken from them. The people of the now named Duskwood were barely clinging to hope as it was. They could not let the memory of one of their heroes be robbed from them again. They buried him and his victims in a quiet and obscure corner of the cemetery in an unmarked grave. This should have been the end of the tale, were life not so full of infinite cruelty. But no more than 1 week passed before his remains would be disturbed. They were gone, leaving the grave vacant of its occupant, who deserved rest more than most. But he could not rest. He could not let go. He could not move on from the pain. He's trapped now, inside his rotting bones. He rose again a servant of darkness, robbing more people of their light should they be unfortunate enough to cross his path. He is a being of 2 worlds now, too fueled by rage and grief to move on, yet ever haunted by his own compulsion to cut people down. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed this tale from the campfire. This one comes from one of my favourite side stories in World of Warcraft. Let me know what your favourite was in the comments. Thanks to everyone for all the support. Every single like and subscribe really does make this worth it. Oh, and don't forget to come back anytime.